So this week we're going to look at the fundamentals of how to light a scene. I light virtually all my scenes in exactly the same way with what's called a 3-point light rig or a 3-light rig or a 3-point rig or a 3-point, I don't know. There's 3 lights and it's a rig, which means there's 3 lights together. So let me show you how a lot of videographers and a lot of YouTubers and a lot of photographers actually light a scene with just 3 lights. Okay, so let's start with the absolute basics. So we're going to light something, so it might as well just be, let's say, an egg. So let's just take the default sphere and make it into an egg. There we go. So before we start to work out the lighting, let's just make a little scene so we can... I don't normally have a scene, a geometry scene behind the models that I do, but in this case, what we're going to do is put a plane down. We'll put what's called a ramp behind it, or I think they're called a cyc, where you have a ramp in the background. So we'll just do a plane. So that's for the background. We'll go into topology of the plane and we'll set that to quite low. If you put your wireframe here at the bottom, then you can see what you're doing. And you'll set your plane down to just a few like that. How bad that egg shape was. So I'll rotate him to the front. Let's make this plane a bit bigger, like so. Validate it, and then we'll go over to come up to the top, and we'll just use SEL mask, like so, and we'll just mask off, say here, something like that. We'll take this, and we'll just move the pivot to there, and just rotate it a bit. And then we'll mask off the next bit, and then we'll rotate that. So you have to just keep moving your pivot like so. So what we're doing now is we've got this basically we've got this backdrop that we can use that's going to literally give us this ramp in the background. You can subdivide that a bit now, and then we'll then scale it up. So clear that mask. If we just subdivide it once like so, you'll see what I mean. So it's going to get smoother like that now. So subdivide it a few times. Turn the wireframe off now. And then we'll make this bigger. Not that way, but we'll make it bigger this way. And we'll make it, let's just drop it right the way up like that. But no, let's just change that pivot point back to how it was. And then we'll bring it out to the front like that. Just want it a little bit bigger so I can really see the shadows as we start to add lighting, something like that. So there we go. So we've now got a scene that we can really see the lighting in like that. So if you just take that now, and you can obviously disregard that plane now, because all we're going to focus on now is the egg. So a couple of things before we dive into what's called PBR lighting. If you come here and look in shading, if you were on matcap now, there's nothing we can do with the lighting. So we've got an image, this image here, the creamy coloured image, and that, if I rotate it round, is an image. You can see the edges of the image there, and that's what they call baked in lighting. So it's going to emulate the kind of lighting we're going to set up, but it's locked to the model. There's nothing we can do. So we can't do it. It doesn't cast shadows. You can see there's nothing underneath, nothing on the ramp or anything like that. So that's no use to us. So you must make sure you're in PBR. And if you're in PBR, that means you're lighting your scene currently with one of these, which is the high dynamic range images. And you can get a lot of these for free from HDRI Haven. If you have a look there, that's where a lot of these are actually from, I think. So at the moment, it doesn't matter which one we're going to choose, because at the moment, what you can see there is being lit by this image here, by this environment image. So I'm going to just turn the exposure right down. So the one that I've picked is almost, I'll do it not quite black. And that means now, as you can see, we've got an unlit scene, which means we can start from the bare minimum and we can start to think about lighting this egg. So one of the really, really most basic scene setups you can get is called a 3-point rig. So, or a 3-point lighting rig, or a similar sort of name. And that means you're going to get 3 lights to light this scene. You're going to get what's called the key light, then the fill light, and then the rim light. And I'll go through each one as we add them. But first of all, what you need to understand is where you're looking from. So if we know that we're going to light this egg, we need to know that we're in front of it, looking directly at it. So most of the time, I'm going to be in this position. And just to be sure that we know that, let's just place the egg in the middle, go to camera and add a view. So wherever we are now, we can just go back to that view. And that means we know that the lighting that we set up will be optimal at this point. So if we're ever stuck now, we just go back to view there and it'll bring us back there. Okay, so first thing we need to do then is add a light. So let's add the first one. And this is, so add a light, there you go. And it's blasted a light straight into the scene. And what you've got now is this one here. So if I just move it out of the way, and this is a world light, and that means wherever I am in the scene, if I pick it up in the middle and move it around, it makes no difference. It's only the orientation that makes a difference. So as you can see, we're getting a shadow dropping down onto the floor, and we can move it around based on how we rotate this lighting around. So if we go all the way up, we're back to not seeing any light because it's only going to be the direction that you're rotating to. So that's not really going to be any use to us, because what we want is more control. So back to lighting, I'm going to click on the little coloured square and change it to spotlight. Now, in other programs, you wouldn't really use spotlights that much, but Nomad is quite limited, so we haven't got the flexibility that we've got in most rendering programs like Arnold or Redshift or any of these. And it hasn't even got the ability that you would get in things like Unreal and in Blender Eevee, because they're much more powerful rendering. This is live rendering in the viewport. But it does have a lot of power, as you're about to see. We've got plenty of things we can do. I'll just put that pin on there so it stays open for us. So let's just change a few things. So first of all, let's knock that intensity down because it's way too much. And then we'll put, see this cone angle, bring that out, and that'll spread it out around the scene a little bit. And then we'll also reduce or increase the softness. So instantly it's got a much softer, more appealing look to it. The further away you pull it, the more diffuse that lighting's going to be. So you could pull it away, and then you could go back into it, and you could, let's just put a little tiny bit of warmth in it, and we'd always have it coming from either the left or the right at the front, angled down like that. So that's pretty much enough to get us going there, I think. So just maybe a little bit more of an angle, and maybe a tad more up on the intensity. Now I've left the material as default on the egg, so you can see this little white highlight here. That's a direct reflection of this light. Now because the HDRI is turned off, you can't see any reflection. If you were to turn that back up, let's just go exposure, turn it up, you'll see that that scene is picking up. So the egg is picking up some of the reflection off that HDRI. And you can see how it's brightened up those shadows. That's what we'll do right at the end. We don't want any of that at the moment. It's just much better to light it as if we haven't got that. And one thing that we can do, just because a lot of what I would like would be creatures, I'm going to just give it a little bit of colour in the skin. So I'll just force paint that. And that means that we've got something that's slightly skin-like. So that's light number 1. And if you look from above, that's at the front to the left. And imagine there's basically, if you draw an imaginary line from where our camera is to where our subject is, it should always be on the left of that. The more that you bring this in and face it to the character, the flatter the lighting's going to be. And I'll show you that in a moment. I'll show exactly what that means in a moment. So that's the key light done. Now what you want to do is do one on exactly the opposite side, and this is called the fill light. So we'll go add a light, this one. You can move it wherever you want, doesn't really matter until you've changed it. We're going to warm this one up a bit as well, but a tiny bit of heat into it, a little bit of orange into it. And then we'll change it to a spotlight. That's fine. I could have duplicated the other one, but it's quite useful just for you to get used to seeing it happen. I'm going to bring it over, make it a little bit lower. Never go lower than the subject. We want the shadows to go down onto the subject. Bring it round from the side. See how bright it is? It's quite intense. So we can bring it up and out a little bit to diffuse it a bit. You're going to take that intensity right down. You're going to increase that cone angle and then increase the softness. And you can see that the shadows, again, the shadow is quite intense at this point, and you're not going to be able to improve that much more at this stage. It isn't the kind of program where you'll be able to fix that much. You're going to get these quite harsh shadows underneath. You can soften them, as I've said, but it's not ideal. So that's two of the three done, and this is pretty much exactly how I do it for every single thing that I like inside of Nomad. So we now just want one more. It's going to add in the last one. Now I know I usually have it as going slightly into the blue color range. Change it to spotlight. Rotate it around so it's facing from the back. Let's have a look from above, like we said, and this one should be coming from the back. Now this one can be called the rim light or the backlight, depending on who it is that's teaching you or talking to you about it. Same scenario as last time, intensity down. You can increase the cone angle, but not as much. Intensity down, cone angle, and then softness, again, right up to give us a nice soft light like that. So that now gives us, let's have a look at our default position. Boom, we're back there. So that is what I would see, and that's the basic lighting setup that I would use to light a scene. Now, if you bring back the HDRI now, let's choose a different HDRI. Let's choose this one. It's got a lot more oranges and goldens in it. And then if you then bring the exposure back up, you can see it might blow out a bit down there at the bottom, but look at the reflections on the egg. You can even knock out that reflection if you want. You can take the reflection down on the egg and then force paint that. Oops, that was the background on the egg. And then take it down like that. Reduce the metalness, because you obviously don't want an egg to be, or a face to be, any of the metalness up like that. And as you can see there now, you've got a nice shadow on the bottom left. You've got a lovely rim light coming in from this light here at the back, and we can move that around a little bit if it is causing any problems. We can tweak this as much as we want now, simply because we've got one of everything in, and half of the work is done now. So everything from this point would be working out and messing around with the settings. I'll just do a 4-finger tap, so you can see just the whole screen like this. So there you go. That is pretty much how I would light most of my characters or creatures. So let's just have a look now at putting that in practice with an example in a scene. Okay, so here's one of the dinosaurs we've been doing from the T-Rex course. So this is a Ceratosaurus, and it's lit exactly the same way as the egg. So we don't have a floor in the same way. We don't have a ramp or a background. We do have a background, so 4-finger tap, and at the moment the background is just black. So if we bring that to grey, you can see that's just a colour in the background. You could easily change that, and you could make that into a background of any other kind. So we could do a starry sky. It doesn't really matter. Obviously we wouldn't in this scenario. But what you might want to do is set something like a ramp in the background, so that you might put a logo in the background, or whatever suits your need for the scene. So for us, we're just lighting it, and it doesn't, we don't need that. So I'm going to look at post-processing. I'm going to have depth of field on. I'm going to have ambient occlusion on. That gives us some of those nice dark shadows. And I'm also going to turn curvature off and vignette on, which gives us that nice darker ridge around the edge of the model. And we'll also put, and sharpness is already on, so that's fine. So with that on now, and let's look at the lighting. We'll tap at the front, and it'll give us that blur effect like that. Maybe that's a bit too much actually. So let's knock down the depth of field a little bit, like so. So with our camera being at the front, for example, this is how it's been set up. Let's now look at it from the top. So what have we got? So we've got a world light here, which is on this side. So this is our fill light, this is our key light, and this is our rim light or backlight, doing exactly the same as the egg. And the reason that this image pops is mainly because of this light, the backlight here. And it pops because whenever you put a backlight in, it almost lifts it off and frames it off the background. So that's why it's one of the most useful lights of the setup, because it's really giving you an indication of the outline or the framing of the subject. If you go back to your HDRI and knock your basically knock the exposure right down, again, it still hasn't really made much of a difference. You can bring it up or down, but the rim light is still the powerful one. And one important thing to note now, if you do a 3-finger roll now, your entire lighting rig is going to roll around. But not only that, if you set your background to the environment, which is your HDRI, let's change it to another one so I can show you really clearly which one it is. This red one, watch. So a 3-finger roll now is your lighting rig and your HDRI. So if you only want to rotate your HDRI, then you do that in here. And you'd use just the rotation in here and leave your lighting alone. And I'd suggest that's what you do most of the time. Because once you've got a camera angle and you've got your lights in the right position, if you start rotating it around a lot without knowing what you're doing, you're going to radically change your scene. Sometimes for the better, but more often it'll be for the worse because you've done a 3-point lighting system like this. So you could get really dramatic lighting like this, but you could also get something that would blow it out of the water like this, and it just wouldn't work from the angle that you want. So that's a good example of where it works and how to just be careful with it. Okay, so with the Swamp Thing one that I did recently, you've got exactly the same. So you've got a 3-point rig. You've got 2 worlds, which could easily be spots. It's totally up to you. This one here on this side, because the environment in the background has got this really rich green, I chose to just tint this green. So if you look in the lighting here, the top one has got a bit of green in it. And that might be a tad too much, because if you went to red, you'll see how powerful that would be. And let's go to like a blue, and you can see it really affects it. So be careful if you're going to pick a colour. And I only did it because he is very green, and he is Swamp Thing's obviously got a reason to be that sort of green. The key light here is just a normal light. It's a world light, so it's not. I'm not using a spotlight there, and that just gives us a nice bit of light from this side. And the one doing all the work, as always, for dramatic, really dramatic characters is this one at the side. So if you take that away, and straight away the power in the image is gone. So it doesn't matter how well you've modelled it, if you haven't got that dramatic kick from the side, then it doesn't really pop at all. Now, one thing that you might want to do, do you see the images in the background? If you've got a light coming in from here, you might want to have a fake light in the background. So see down here, this side where there's a bright light, or even more importantly, if we did it, it would be better to actually light it from this side, simply because there is a bright light on this side. So let's bring it round from here, and we're actually faking. Let's just get it where we need it. So if we bring him from this side, make sure it's at the back and bring it forward and down again, like so. So what your brain is seeing is that light in the background, the actual background image. Your brain is telling you that that light is coming from there. So if I turn that off, and you can see now, your brain is thinking that that's coming from the image in the background and hitting Swamp Thing on the side of his head there. So always be looking for opportunities where you can use your background image to do this kind of complementary work, and you'll find that a lot in videography and a lot of photography, where they will light it with a light like this, and in the background you'll see a lamp on a desk or a newer light or something like that helps it there. So let's just give you one more example. So this one is the bird that I did recently, which is an Archaeopteryx, and this one caused quite a bit of traffic for our Instagram and Twitter because of the feathers, which I'm still to do a video for you of that. But the reason that this pops, you already know. So there's the 3-point lighting rig. So it's slightly different in this case because I put two. This one's much more at the back. So that's because it's got this red effect for here. So this is an example of where we're breaking the rules to get a dramatic effect. And you might also see that, and you can see it in the image in the background, which is just a render, is it looks like there's a lot more, it's a lot sharper. So I did two things there. I used curvature, and I changed the curvature to the colour of the feathers. So the bump would be like a browny colour, and the cavity would be a dark colour. And that just gives you that really nice pop on, say, for example, the scales. So with a combination of those things, so the lighting, 3-point rig, the feathers, which again, you're going to have to wait because we've got another video coming for that. And with the curvature, you're getting a really strong dynamic image. And it's very illustrative. So look at the feathers down here on the side because of what we're getting. If you look closely, it's a horrible, terrible mess. But we're not worried about that because what we're after is a graphical illustration of what we're trying to portray. Now, if I just roll the whole scene round, you'll see how bad it is on the back. And that's because as I'm rolling round, the lights are moving with me. But what you should be doing is moving the lights around as well. So, and remember in the last little section I said you should move your HDRI separately as well. Like so. So you're going to be moving it around all the time. If I was lighting this one, then I would put it back like this. So rim light in the background, key light and fill light in whichever position you choose. And that's half of the battle for anything you're going to make. Don't be thinking that all of your work is in the modeling and the sculpting. The reason we see things in the world is because light bounces off things and hits our eyes. So you've always got to think that where you're looking for is really important. So I'm going to be looking from the front here. Therefore, how is the light going to react with my model? And if you light it directly above it, or if you light it in a way that where you're not planning it out like this, then you're just going to get flat, uninteresting models, however good your models are. So have a go with that. Try it with your own models. Go back to your older models, put a 3-point lighting rig in, and just try and get some dynamism in there. You could then start breaking the rules. So if I put a green light in, bring it down to the bottom and rotate it up, then that's when we're getting into like dramatic horror lighting and things like that. So, don't be afraid to try things like this once you've understood the basics of a 3-point light rig. And that's only the basics of lighting. So there's plenty more and much more advanced than that once you get into the more detailed tutorials for things like Blender and Redshift. Thanks for following along with the video, and if you're liking this kind of content, then please give it a thumbs up. It does help us to get in front of other artists. We're hoping to build the channel into a really big resource for people to create in new and innovative ways. And if that's something you're interested in, then go down to the bottom and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and we'll let you know when we drop new content, which is at the moment every Wednesday and every Friday.